The wreck drifted in silence, turning slowly against a field of cold stars. To the naked eye, it looked dead. No lights, no heat signature worth mentioning, no radio chatter, just a long gray hull, scarred with old battle marks, tumbling end over end, like a piece of driftwood lost at sea. The Drell scout ship Ashenblade had been sailing this dead stretch of space for 6 days, hunting for salvage after the last big fight near the Kessa line. The battle there had been brutal, and both sides had left broken ships behind. Most of the wrecks were Drell, a few were human. This one was human. Commander Vorn Tal stood on the bridge of the Ashenblade, his 4 eyes fixed on the view screen. He was an older Drell, with pale gray skin and dark ridges running down the back of his neck, marks of rank earned over 30 years of service. He had fought humans before. He did not like them. But he respected what was left of them, which by his count was not much. "Report," he said, his voice low and rough, translated instantly into the common tongue his crew used. "No power signature, Commander," said Sask, the ship's sensor officer, a younger Drell with quick hands and quicker words. "No drive activity. No comms. Hull integrity is at 60%. This is a corpse, sir. A rich one, though. Look at the size of her." Vorn looked. The human ship was enormous compared to the Ashenblade, nearly 4 times the length, with wide flanks and a blunt, ugly nose that human designers seemed to favor. The Drell found human ships strange to look at, all sharp angles and thick armor plating, built like something meant to survive being hit, rather than avoid being hit at all. Drell ships were built for speed and grace. Human ships were built to take a beating and keep moving.
"This one took a beating,"
Sask added, running another scan. "See the scoring along the port side? That's plasma fire. Recent too. Maybe 2-3 weeks old. She got hit hard in that last fight and drifted off before she could be finished. Her own people probably think she's gone. Written off. Nobody's coming back for this one, sir." Vorn allowed himself something close to satisfaction. The war with the humans had dragged on for years longer than anyone in the Drell assembly had expected. Humanity was a young species, new to the stars, without the ancient bloodlines or old empires that most of the galaxy's powers could claim. When the first contact reports came in, the assembly's analysts had predicted a short campaign. Humans were soft, short-lived, quick to anger, and quick to break. That was the official assessment, repeated in 100 briefings. But the war had not gone the way the briefings promised. Human ships kept showing up in places they should not have been able to reach. Human tactics kept changing, adapting, learning faster than any enemy the Drell had fought before. Whole fleets vanished into ambushes that should have been impossible to set. Vorn had lost friends to those ambushes. He had lost his own left hand to one, 3 years back, replaced now with a synthetic one that still ached in the cold. So when Sask told him the wreck was dead and drifting, Vorn did not simply believe it. He made his crew check twice. "Run a deep scan," he ordered. "All bands. I want thermal, magnetic, gravimetric, everything we have. If there is a single power cell still breathing in that hull, I want to know about it before we send anyone aboard." Sask worked the console for several minutes. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the Ashenblade's own systems, and the occasional click of Sask's claws against the panel. "Confirmed dead, sir," Sask said finally. "Thermal signature is flat, matching the background radiation of open space. No magnetic fields beyond what you'd expect from a cold reactor core. No gravimetric distortion. If there's anyone alive in there, they are hiding better than physics allows." "Human physics has surprised us before," Vorn muttered. "Not this time, sir. This ship is a tomb. A big, valuable tomb. But a tomb all the same." Vorn considered his orders. Salvage rights on a wreck this size were worth a great deal back at Assembly Command. Human hulls were built from alloys the Drell had not fully mastered, and human computer cores, even burned-out ones, carried encryption techniques that Drell cryptographers would pay handsomely to study. If this ship really was empty, stripping her clean would make Vorn's whole crew wealthy and would earn him another rank besides. If it was not empty, well, that was why the Ashenblade carried a boarding team. "Prepare a party," Vorn said. "Full armor, full weapons. I want 6 of our best, led by someone who won't get excited and start shooting at shadows. Sask, you're staying on the bridge with me. Send for Tarn." Tarn is already suited up, sir. He heard the scan results over the comm and started dressing before you finished the sentence. Tarn Rek was the closest thing the Ashen Blade had to a soldier. He had transferred in from a Drell Marine unit 2 years earlier, after an injury took him off frontline combat duty, and he had spent that time training the ship's small security detachment into something resembling real fighters. He was broad for a Drell, with scarred hands and a habit of chewing on dried root fibers before any dangerous work, a habit his squad found either comforting or unsettling depending on their mood. He arrived on the bridge already in his armor, a heavy dark suit plated with overlapping scales that could stop small arms fire and shrug off shrapnel. His helmet was tucked under one arm, revealing a face marked with 3 long scars across the left cheek, souvenirs from an old skirmish he rarely talked about. "You called for me, Commander." "The human wreck," Vorn said, gesturing at the screen. "Dead ship, good salvage, no life signs. I want your team over there to secure the vessel and confirm the scans before we send the recovery crews in behind you. Standard procedure. In and out, no surprises." Tarn studied the image on the screen for a long moment. His eyes lingered on the scoring along the hull, on the dark, silent shape of the human ship turning slowly against the stars. "With respect, Commander, I have fought humans before. 6 years, 3 campaigns. I have seen them do things that should not have been possible according to every briefing document the Assembly ever wrote. I would like permission to treat this as a live mission, not a salvage walk." Vorn's ridges tightened, a Drell expression that meant something between amusement and irritation. "The scans are clean, Tarn." "The scans were clean at Kessa Point too, sir. Right before that human frigate came out of a debris field that should have hidden nothing bigger than a shuttle and put 3 torpedoes into the Long Reach." There was a silence on the bridge. Everyone remembered the Long Reach. 400 crew, gone in less than a minute. Vorn's ridges relaxed slightly. He respected caution, even when it slowed things down. "Very well. Treat it as live. Full protocol. Weapons hot, but do not fire unless fired upon. If this ship truly is empty, I want the recovery teams to have a wreck to work with, not a smoking ruin. Understood?" "Understood, sir." Tarn gathered his team in the shuttle bay 15 minutes later. 5 other Drells stood waiting, checking their weapons and running last diagnostics on their suits. There was Riss, the squad's youngest member, still eager in a way that made the older soldiers smile and worry in equal measure. There was Dothan, quiet and steady, a veteran of more boarding actions than anyone else aboard. There was Kale and Vessa, twins who had joined the fleet together and fought together in every posting since. And there was old Merrick, gray-skinned and slow-moving, but with the calmest hands on the ship when it came to disarming traps and rigging explosive charges. "Listen up," Tarn said, his voice carrying easily in the enclosed bay. "Command says this ship is dead. Command has been wrong before. We go in slow, we go in careful, and nobody touches anything that looks interesting until Merrick clears it first. If something feels wrong, you say so, and we stop and check it out. I would rather waste an hour checking a shadow than lose one of you to a trick the humans left behind. Clear?" "Clear," the squad answered together. The shuttle detached from the Ashen Blade 20 minutes later, gliding across the gap of dark space between the 2 vessels. Up close, the human ship was even more imposing than the sensors had suggested. Long scorch marks ran the length of her hull like old scars. One of her secondary engine pods hung at an angle, clearly damaged beyond repair. Near the bow, a section of outer plating had been torn away entirely, revealing the skeletal framework beneath, twisted and blackened. "UN's Halcyon," Sask read over the comm, translating the faded lettering on the hull from the shuttle's approach cameras. "That is her name. Halcyon. Means something like calm or peaceful in their old tongue, according to the database." "Fitting," Dothan said dryly. "She looks very peaceful now." The shuttle found a breach near the ship's midsection, a gap in the hull plating wide enough to fly a small craft through if the pilot was skilled. Riss guided them in carefully, easing the shuttle alongside the opening, before extending a docking collar to seal against the torn metal. "Seal is good," Riss reported. "Pressure on the other side reads at almost nothing. No atmosphere left in this section. Ship's been open to vacuum a while." "Then we go in suited and stay suited," Tarn said. "Helmets sealed the whole time. No exceptions." One by one, The boarding team cycled through the docking collar and stepped into the wreck of the Halcyon. The corridor beyond the breach was dark, lit only by the beams of their helmet lamps cutting through drifting dust and debris. The air, what little of it remained, trapped in pockets throughout the ship, was bitterly cold. Cold enough that frost had formed on every metal surface, turning the corridor into something that looked more like a cave of ice than the inside of a warship. Movement scanners are quiet, Merrick reported, sweeping a handheld sensor unit across the corridor ahead. No heat, no motion, nothing on infrared. This place really does look empty, Tarn. Looks, Tarn repeated. Keep moving, slow and careful. They advanced deeper into the ship, past torn wall panels and dead consoles, past a maintenance bay where tools floated gently in the absence of gravity, disturbed only by the passage of the Drell soldiers. Twice they found bodies, human crew who had died when the hull breached, their forms frozen and still, drifting in the corners of rooms where the vacuum had pulled them. Rhys flinched the first time, a young soldier's reaction to death up close, but said nothing. This is a war grave, Vesa said quietly. Feels wrong to be walking through it. War is wrong, Kale answered, his twin's usual reply to such comments. Doesn't stop it from happening. They pressed on toward the ship's center, following the direction Sask had marked as most likely to house the primary computer core, the richest prize for any salvage crew. The corridors here were wider, clearly built for crew traffic rather than maintenance access, and showed less damage than the outer sections. The deeper they went, the less debris they found floating loose, as though this part of the ship had somehow avoided the worst of whatever battle had crippled her. Odd, Merrick muttered, almost to himself. What's odd? Tarn asked. This section of the ship. Less damage, less debris, almost like someone cleaned it up after the fact. Merrick paused, running his sensor across a stretch of wall paneling that looked freshly sealed compared to the scorched metal around it, or like it was never damaged in the first place, and someone wanted it to look otherwise from a distance. Tarn stopped walking. Say that again. I'm not certain, Tarn. Could be nothing. Battle damage is never even. Some sections always survive better than others depending on where the hits land, but the seams on this panel are too clean. Human hull work, even good human hull work, doesn't usually look this tidy after being blasted open and exposed to vacuum. The squad stood still for a long moment, 6 beams of helmet light crossing and recrossing in the frozen dark, illuminating a corridor that suddenly felt less like a tomb and more like something else. Something waiting. Command, Tarn said over the comm, keeping his voice level. This is boarding team. We are seeing some irregularities in hull damage patterns near the ship's center, requesting updated scan data before we proceed further. There was a pause before Sask's voice came back, tight with concentration. Copy boarding team, running the scan again now. Tarn, I'm not seeing anything new. Still reads flat. No power, no heat, nothing live. Understood. We'll proceed with caution. They moved forward again, more slowly now, weapons raised, every soldier's attention sharpened by the unease that had settled over the group. The corridor bent ahead, opening into what looked like a junction point, several passages branching off toward different parts of the ship. A heavy blast door stood at the far end, its surface marked with human lettering that the squad's translators rendered as a designation for the ship's primary computer core and command deck access. There, Tarn said, gesturing with his weapon. That's our prize. Merrick, check that door for anything that might bite us before we open it. Merrick moved forward, running his sensor slowly across the door's surface, checking the seams, the locking mechanism, the faint traces of wiring visible beneath a cracked access panel nearby. For a long moment he said nothing, and the rest of the squad waited in silence, watching their own breath fog faintly inside their helmets despite the suit's climate controls. It's clean, Merrick said finally. No explosives, no traps that I can find. Door's locked, but that's just standard security, nothing active. I can have it open in a few minutes. Do it, Tarn said. Merrick set to work, his old hands moving with practiced patience over the door's control panel, bypassing the lock circuit by circuit. The rest of the squad fanned out to cover the junction, weapons trained on the branching corridors, watching, waiting, the silence of the dead ship pressing down on all of them like a physical weight. It took nearly 10 minutes, but finally the blast door gave a soft groan and began to slide open, revealing a dark space beyond, lit only by the faintest residual glow of a few emergency indicator lights. most of them long since dead. "We're in," Merrick said, stepping back to let Tarn take point. Tarn moved through the opening first, sweeping his weapon and helmet light across the space beyond. It was the ship's command deck, larger than any Drell bridge he had seen. Rows of dark consoles, arranged in a wide arc facing a central view screen that showed nothing now but the frozen dark of dead systems. Frost coated every surface. A few pieces of equipment drifted gently in the absence of gravity. The room looked, in every visible way, exactly as dead as the rest of the ship. "Command deck secured," Tarn reported. "No hostiles, no life signs. This ship really is a corpse, Commander. Beginning primary core scan now." He gestured for Dothan and Riss to move to the main computer terminal at the center of the room, while Kale and Vesa took up positions near the entrance, and Merrick continued his slow, careful sweep of the room's edges, checking for anything the initial pass might have missed. Dothan reached the main terminal and pressed a gloved hand against its dark surface, running a portable scanner across the housing to check for any residual data that might be extracted once the recovery teams arrived. "Core's cold," Dothan reported. "Completely dead, no power reserves at all. This will need external power to even attempt a data pull. Might take hours once the recovery crew gets here with the right gear." "That's fine," Tarn said. "Our job is just to confirm and secure. Let the specialists handle the rest." He turned slowly, sweeping his light across the wide arc of dead consoles one more time, some old instinct still nagging at the back of his mind, despite the overwhelming evidence that the ship was exactly what the scans said it was. Empty. Dead. Harmless. "Command," he said over the comm. "Boarding team reporting. Command deck is secure. Primary core located and confirmed dead. Recommend sending recovery teams at your convenience. This wreck is everything the scans promised, sir. Nothing but a very valuable, very quiet grave." There was a brief pause before Vorn's voice came back, satisfaction evident even through the translated tone. "Excellent work, Tarn. You may begin a preliminary sweep of the crew quarters while we prepare the recovery shuttles. Standard procedure. Confirm any remaining bodies for record purposes and check for personal effects of value." "Copy that, Commander. Beginning sweep now." Tarn gestured for his squad to fall in, and they began moving back toward the corridor junction, ready to spread out through the ship's crew sections as ordered. Behind them, on the dark, silent command deck, nothing moved. No lights flickered. No systems stirred. But deep within the Halcyon's frozen hull, far below the command deck, in a section of the ship the Drell scans had never quite managed to penetrate cleanly, something had been listening. Something had been counting the footsteps of 6 sets of boots moving through corridors that were never as dead as they appeared. Something had been waiting, patient and quiet, for exactly this moment. As Tarn's squad reached the junction point once more, preparing to split into 2 teams for the crew quarters sweep, a single, soft sound echoed through the frozen corridors of the Halcyon, so faint that at first none of them were certain they had heard it at all. A low hum, deep in the ship's bones, like something enormous slowly waking up. And then, one by one, down every corridor of the UNS Halcyon, the lights began to turn on. Red. Tarn froze mid-step, his weapon snapping up toward the nearest wall panel, as the dim red glow spread down the corridor behind them. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the ship's dead air, the same air that had been silent and still since they boarded, filled with a low mechanical groan, the sound of systems that had not run in weeks, stirring back to life. "Report." Vorn's voice cracked over the comm, sharp with sudden alarm. "Tarn, what is happening over there?" "Sask, what do the scans say?" "Power spike," Sask answered, his voice tight. "Massive power spike, ship-wide. Commander, she's not dead. She was never dead. Something just switched her on." On the command deck, the frost-covered consoles that had looked so lifeless moments before, now flickered with faint light beneath their icy coating. Symbols and readouts in the sharp, blocky human script beginning to scroll across screens that should have had no power at all. The central view screen, dark since the moment Tarn's squad had entered, now glowed with a soft crimson light, casting long shadows across the room. "Marek, get that door shut again," Tarn snapped, gesturing back toward the blast door they had come through. "Already on it," Marek called back, moving fast for an old soldier, hands working the panel controls. But the door did not respond to his touch. The lock circuit he had bypassed minutes earlier now refused every command, the panel flashing an error in the sharp geometric symbols of the human alphabet. "It's locked us in," Merrick said, an edge of disbelief in his voice. "Not locked out, locked in. The whole panel's been overridden." "Command," Tarn said, forcing his voice to stay level even as his pulse quickened. "We have a situation. Ship systems are active. Repeat, this vessel is not dead. We are currently sealed inside the command deck, requesting immediate instructions." There was a pause, longer this time, before Vorn's voice returned. "Get out of there, Tarn. Whatever this is, I want my people clear of it. Force that door if you have to." "Copy that." Kale moved forward with a portable breaching charge from his kit, but before he could set it against the doorframe, a new sound rose through the ship. A calm, measured voice speaking in flat, unaccented common, the trade language used across most of known space for exactly this kind of situation. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, from speakers built into the walls themselves. "Unauthorized boarding detected. 6 hostile combatants confirmed aboard. Emergency defense protocol Crimson Wake is now active. This vessel is not a derelict. This vessel is a decommissioned asset of the United Nations Space Fleet, currently operating under Ghost Ship Directive 7. You are advised to surrender your weapons and remain still. Resistance will be met with escalating countermeasures." Riss let out a short, sharp breath. The closest Adrel came to a curse in the heat of the moment. "It's talking to us. The ship itself is talking to us." "Ship AI," Dothan said grimly. "Has to be. A ship AI running defense protocols without a living crew to give the orders. Or with a crew we simply have not found yet," Marek added, still working uselessly at the door panel. Tarn's mind raced through everything he knew about human tactics, every briefing, every after-action report he had read in 6 years of fighting this stubborn, unpredictable species. Humans built things that lied, ships that looked crippled but were not, fleets that looked scattered but moved as one, and now, apparently, wrecks that looked dead but were very much alive, waiting patiently for someone foolish enough to walk aboard. "This was a trap," he said quietly. "The whole thing, the damage, the drift pattern, all of it staged to look like a kill from that last battle. They wanted someone to come aboard." "Then why aren't we dead yet?" Vesa asked, weapon raised toward the nearest speaker grill, as though she could shoot the voice itself. As if in answer, the temperature in the command deck began to drop, the already frigid air growing sharper, colder, biting even through the climate controls of their armored suits. The lights along the floor and ceiling pulsed a deeper red, and a soft vibration ran through the deck plating beneath their boots. "Gravity plating is fluctuating," Merrick reported, bracing himself against a console as the deck seemed to tilt for a fraction of a second before righting itself. "They're not trying to kill us outright. Not yet. This feels like harassment, softening us up." "Command," Tarn called again, requesting immediate extraction or reinforcement. "This ship has active defense systems, and we are currently trapped on the command deck." Vorn's reply came fast this time, stripped of its earlier calm. "Extraction shuttle is inbound to your position, but the docking collar you used has just registered a hull breach seal, Tarn. Something closed the gap you came through. I am reading a hard vacuum lock across your entire boarding route." "They sealed the ship around us," Tarn said, half to himself, half to his squad. "Everyone, find another way out. Merrick, is there a secondary exit from this deck?" Merrick checked the schematics pulled up on his suit display, the layout of the Halcyon, rendered in ghostly blue lines. "There's a maintenance shaft on the far side, past the tactical station. Should lead down toward the mid-decks. From there we might find another breach point, or at least somewhere to make a stand until extraction can reach us." "Move," Tarn ordered. The squad crossed the command deck quickly, weapons still raised, eyes darting to every shadow the red emergency lighting carved into the room. As they reached the far wall, a low panel slid open on its own, revealing the maintenance shaft Merrick had identified, a narrow vertical passage lined with rungs and conduit pipes, running down into darkness. "That's convenient," Dothan muttered. "Too convenient," Tarn said. "But we don't have another option. Merrick, you first. You know the layout best. Riss, you're last. Watch our backs." One by one they descended into the shaft, boots finding rungs coated in frost, the red glow from the command deck fading above them, as they climbed down into the ship's guts. The shaft was tight, forcing them to move single file, weapons awkward in the narrow space, and every clang of metal against metal echoed far louder than any of them liked. Far above, on the bridge of the Ashen Blade, Vorn watched the sensor data pouring in with a growing sense of dread he had not felt since the early days of the war, before the Assembly's confidence had hardened into arrogance about human weakness. Sask, talk to me. What in the void is that ship? Sask's claws moved rapidly across his console, pulling data from every scan the Ashen Blade could manage at this range. Commander, I'm cross-referencing the hull designation now. UNS Halcyon. Matches records of a human cruiser, reported destroyed at the Battle of Vesic Corridor, 4 months ago. Officially listed as lost with all hands. Officially, Vorn repeated. There's more, sir. I'm finding fragments of an intelligence briefing our analysts filed after Vesic. Human forces were suspected of running what our people called ghost ship operations, decommissioned or badly damaged hulls stripped of most crew, refitted with autonomous defense systems and left drifting in contested space to bait salvage operations by hostile forces. The report was marked as unconfirmed, low priority. Nobody followed up on it. Vorn's ridges pulled tight with anger, though whether at the humans or at his own assembly's carelessness, even he could not say for certain. So my boarding team just walked into a trap that has been sitting in an intelligence file for 4 months, ignored. It appears so, sir. Get me a channel to Fleet Command. I want reinforcements moving toward our position immediately, and I want to know if there are any other Drell vessels in this sector who might have stumbled into the same kind of bait. Down in the maintenance shaft, Tarn's squad reached the bottom and emerged into a mid-deck corridor, narrower than the ones above, lined with pipes and conduit runs, rather than the smooth paneling of crew areas. The red emergency lighting followed them here too, pulsing steadily along the ceiling strips, and the ship's calm voice spoke again, echoing down the passage from unseen speakers. You have chosen to resist rather than surrender. Escalation protocol engaged. Please be advised that lethal countermeasures will begin in 60 seconds unless all 6 intruders lay down weapons and remain stationary. 60 seconds, Riss said, voice tight. They're giving us a chance, Dothan said, disbelief plain in his tone. Why would they give us a chance? Because they don't need to kill us to win, Tarn said grimly, already moving down the corridor, scanning for any side passage that might offer cover, or another route deeper into the ship. Dead Drell soldiers tell them nothing. Live prisoners tell them everything. This whole thing isn't about killing us, Dothan. It's about capturing us. That realization seemed to settle over the squad like a physical weight, and their pace quickened, boots pounding against frost-slick decking, as they searched for any way to break the trap closing around them. Elsewhere on the ship, in a section the Drell scans had never managed to penetrate, deep behind layers of shielding, designed specifically to defeat exactly the kind of scans a Drell scout ship would run. 6 cryogenic pods stood in a row, inside a hidden compartment built into the Halcyon. A's reinforced spine, the compartment had no windows, no obvious power signature from outside, and had been constructed as part of the ship's original ghost ship refit, a secret even from most of the fleet crews who had served aboard her before her staged destruction. Inside those pods, 6 human Marines had spent the past 4 months in low-power stasis, their vital signs slowed to a fraction of normal, waiting for exactly this kind of trigger. When the Halcyon sees onboard intelligence, a specialized combat AI known internally as Watchdog, detected sustained hostile boarding activity matching its activation parameters. It had begun the wake cycle nearly 20 minutes earlier, timed carefully so the Marines would be ready right around the moment the intruders reached the mid-decks. The first pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of cold vapor into the dim compartment. Sergeant Mara Ilves sat up slowly, blinking against the low light, her body aching from months of induced stillness, but her mind clearing, with the practiced speed of someone who had trained for this exact scenario more times than she could count. Report, she rasped, her voice rough from disuse, directing the question to the compartment's speaker system rather than any human present. The calm voice of Watchdog answered immediately. 6 confirmed hostiles aboard, identified as Drell military personnel, currently moving through mid-deck Corridor 7, heading toward the aft cargo section. Escalation protocol has been initiated per standard rules of engagement. I recommend intercept at Junction 12, where corridor geometry favors a small, well-armed defensive force. Around her, the other 5 pods hissed open in sequence, releasing Corporal Danny Osei, Private Ren Castillo, Private Big Tom Halverson, Specialist Ana Reyes, and the squad's quiet, watchful sniper, Private First Class Jonah Lin. They moved slowly at first, working feeling back into stiff limbs, checking gear that had been prepared, and waiting beside each pod for exactly this moment. 4 months, Osei muttered, flexing his fingers inside heavy combat gloves. Feels like I just closed my eyes. Feels worse than that, Halverson grumbled, rolling his shoulders with a series of loud cracks, like getting hit by a truck and then told to take a nap about it. Save the complaints, Ilva said, already checking the charge on her rifle. We've got 6 Drell soldiers wandering around in our ship, and Doc's telling me they've got maybe 40 seconds left before Crimson Wake goes lethal. I'd rather take some of them alive if we can manage it. Command wants intel, not corpses. Copy that, Sarge, Reyes said, checking her own weapon. Non-lethal first, lethal if they force it. That's the idea. Ilves turned toward the compartment's hidden exit, a reinforced hatch that slid open silently as she approached, revealing a narrow access corridor leading toward the ship's central spine. Watchdog, hold escalation at current level. Give my squad a chance to reach intercept position before you turn this into a firefight. Acknowledged, Sergeant. Holding non-lethal countermeasures for 90 additional seconds. Recommend haste. The squad moved out fast, boots silent against the deck thanks to specially dampened gear, built for exactly this kind of close-quarters ship combat. Weapons ready, faces set with the particular calm of soldiers who had trained for months, if not years, for a mission most of them had never expected to actually run. Back in the mid-deck corridor, Tarn's squad reached a junction point marked on Merrick's schematic display as Corridor 12, a wide intersection where several passages met, offering multiple routes deeper into the ship, or, potentially, back toward another section that might lead to a hull breach. This way, Merrick called, gesturing toward the leftmost passage, should lead toward the aft cargo bays. If there's another breach anywhere on this wreck, it'll likely be there. They started forward, and that was when the ship's calm voice spoke one final time, no longer offering warnings or countdowns, its tone unchanged but its message unmistakable in its finality. Escalation window has closed. Engaging countermeasures. The lights along the corridor flared brighter, the deep red shifting suddenly to a pulsing, urgent crimson, and somewhere ahead in the darkness of Corridor 12, 6 shapes moved into position, with the practiced precision of soldiers who had waited months, in frozen sleep, for exactly this fight. Tarn's squad rounded the corner and found themselves staring down the barrels of 6 human rifles, held by 6 figures who did not look tired, did not look weak, and did not, in any way Tarn's 6 years of fighting this species had prepared him for, look like they intended to lose. Drop your weapons, Ilves called out, her voice carrying clearly down the corridor, translated automatically by the same universal systems both sides had relied on throughout the war. Last chance. For a long, frozen moment, nobody on either side moved. Tarn's mind moved fast, running through every option available to him in the space of a single breath. 6 Drell soldiers, tired, cold, and boxed in on unfamiliar ground. 6 human soldiers, rested from stasis, armed, and standing on a battlefield they had clearly built and prepared months in advance. The math was not good, and Tarn had never been the kind of officer who pretended otherwise, just to sound brave in front of his squad. But surrender to humans carried its own risks. Command back home would not look kindly on captured soldiers, and worse, Tarn had heard stories, some true and some likely exaggerated, about what human interrogators could pull from a captured mind, given enough time and the right equipment. He did not know if those stories were accurate. He did know he did not want to find out personally. Cover positions, he said quietly over the squad channel, dropping low behind a support strut jutting from the corridor wall. Riss, left side. Dothan, right. We are not standing in the open for this. The response from the humans came almost instantly, not gunfire, but a small canister thrown low and fast down the corridor, bouncing once off the deck plating, before hissing open in a burst of thick white smoke that filled the passage in seconds. Gas, Merrick called, though his suit's filters were already compensating, the readout on his display confirming the substance as a disorientation agent rather than anything lethal. Non-lethal, like the ship warned us. Through the haze, motion flickered, human shapes advancing low and fast, using the smoke as cover, rather than being hindered by it, moving with the confidence of soldiers who trained constantly in exactly these conditions. Tarn fired twice into the smoke where he judged a target should be, the plasma bolts lighting the haze orange for an instant, but the impacts sparked off deck plating rather than flesh. The humans were not where he expected them to be. "They're using the smoke against us," Dothan snapped, backing toward the strut where Tarn crouched. "Can't get a clean shot." A blur of motion resolved suddenly into Halverson, moving with surprising speed for someone his size, closing the gap and slamming a stun baton into Dothan's shoulder, before the Drell soldier could bring his weapon fully around. Dothan went down hard, his suit's systems flaring with error warnings as the electrical charge scrambled his armor's internal sensors. "Dothan's down," Riss called, firing blind into the smoke in Halverson's general direction, forcing the big human to duck back rather than press the advantage. Behind them, Marek had already broken away from the main group, moving low toward a side passage he had marked earlier, dragging Dothan's stunned but breathing form with him despite his age and the awkward weight of another Drell's armored body. "Where's Marek going?" Vesa demanded, back to back with her twin brother Kale as they both fired in short, controlled bursts into the smoke, trying to buy space rather than land hits they could barely see to aim. "Getting Dothan clear," Tarn answered. "Focus on the fight in front of you." The humans, for their part, were fighting with a discipline that unsettled Tarn more than raw aggression would have. They did not charge in recklessly. They moved in pairs, covering each other, using the smoke and the tight confines of the corridor to control the engagement, rather than simply overwhelm it with numbers they did not actually have. 6 against 6 should have been an even fight. It was not feeling even. Ose and Reyes worked together on the left flank, Ose laying down suppressing fire that forced Kale and Vesa to keep their heads down, while Reyes flanked wide through a side conduit access, popping out behind the twins with her rifle already raised. "Behind you," Kale shouted, spinning too late as Reyes fired, the stun round catching Vesa square in the back and dropping her instantly, the twin bond that had kept the two of them fighting side by side for years, now leaving Kale staring at his fallen sister with a horror that cost him the half-second he needed to properly defend himself. Ose's next shot took Kale in the leg, and he went down beside Vesa, both twins out of the fight within seconds of each other. "Two down," Tarn heard Ilves call out somewhere in the smoke, her voice calm, almost clinical, like she was reading off a scoreboard rather than directing a firefight. "Nice work, Ose. Reyes, fall back to secondary positions. Let's finish this clean." Tarn felt something cold settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's frigid air. This was not a desperate last stand by a handful of soldiers caught by surprise. This was a controlled, methodical takedown, executed by people who had clearly rehearsed exactly this kind of fight, more times than he cared to imagine. "Riss, with me," he said, backing away from the strut, pulling the younger soldier with him, toward the passage Marek had used to escape with Dothan. "We are not winning this corridor. We regroup and find better ground." They retreated fast, boots slipping slightly on the frost-slicked deck, leaving the smoke-filled junction behind them, as the sounds of the brief, one-sided battle faded into the distance. Behind them, Tarn caught a final glimpse through the thinning smoke of Halverson and Castillo, securing the fallen forms of Kale and Vesa, with quick, efficient restraints, the twins already beginning to stir from the stun charges, but clearly no longer any threat to anyone. "Two captured, sir," he reported grimly to Vorn over the comm, static crackling through the channel, as the ship's own systems seemed to interfere with clean transmission. "We are down to 4, falling back toward the aft sections. Requesting any update on extraction." Vorn's voice came back strained, layered with the sound of alarms Tarn could hear even through the connection. "Tarn, listen carefully. Extraction shuttle reports the entire aft section of the Halcyon has gone dark on our scanners. Some kind of jamming field just came online. We cannot get an accurate read on your position or the ship's exterior condition anymore. Worse, I am now reading additional contacts entering the system, still distant, but they read as human warships, and they are burning hard toward our position." "A trap within a trap," Tarn muttered. "It would seem so," Vorn admitted. I am recalling the Ashen Blade to a defensive posture and requesting immediate reinforcement from the nearest assembly fleet elements. But that will take time, Tarn. More time than I would like. You need to survive on your own for a while. Understood, Commander. Tarn cut the channel and turned to Riss, whose young face, visible through her helmet visor, had gone pale despite the calm she was clearly forcing into her voice. What do we do? Riss asked. We find Merrick and Dothan, Tarn said. And then we find somewhere defensible, and we hold, because right now, running is just delaying the inevitable, and I would rather go down fighting on ground I chose than get run down in a corridor that favors them. They found Merrick in a small side compartment that had once served as a secondary supply store, the shelves long since stripped bare, Dothan propped against the wall nearby, still groggy from the stun charge but slowly regaining full control of his limbs. He'll be fit to fight again in a few minutes, Merrick reported, glancing up as Tarn and Riss entered. That charge scrambled his suit's systems more than it hurt him directly. Human non-lethal weapons are built to incapacitate, not injure. Interesting, considering how badly they want us out of the fight rather than dead. They want prisoners, Tarn said again, settling into a defensive position, near the compartment's single entrance. Every choice they've made since we boarded has confirmed that. The smoke, the stun weapons, even that first countdown warning back in the corridor. This whole operation is designed to take us alive. Small comfort, Dothan rasped, finally pushing himself upright with Merrick's help. Being taken alive by an enemy that spent the last several years trying to figure out how to beat us in every other way doesn't sound especially comforting, Tarn. No, Tarn agreed. It doesn't. Outside their small refuge, the sounds of the ship shifted subtly, a change in the ambient hum that even Tarn's untrained ear could pick up. The gravity plating beneath their boots seemed to stabilize suddenly, no longer flickering with the earlier disorienting fluctuations, and the pulsing red emergency lighting along the corridors dimmed slightly, settling into a steadier, less aggressive glow. They've stopped the countermeasures, Riss observed. Why would they stop now? Because they don't need them anymore, Merrick said grimly, checking his handheld scanner. Look at this readout. I'm picking up multiple additional biosignatures throughout the ship, distributed at what looks like defensive checkpoints along every major corridor leading toward our position. They've stopped harassing us with the ship's systems because they've finished setting a much more direct kind of trap. Tarn absorbed this information with the weary calm of a soldier who had long since stopped being surprised by how thoroughly the humans could outplan an opponent. Then we hold here, force them to come to us on our terms, in a space we control, rather than walking into whatever corridor they've decided to funnel us toward next. Agreed, Dothan said, finally steady enough to lift his weapon again, though his movements were still slightly stiff from the lingering effects of the stun charge. Better to make a stand than keep running from a fight we can't outrun anyway. They spent the next several minutes fortifying their small compartment as best they could, overturning empty supply racks to create makeshift cover near the entrance, checking weapons and remaining ordnance, preparing for what all four of them understood was likely to be their final stand aboard the UNS Halcyon. Unless reinforcements from the Ashen Blade could somehow reach them first. Outside, moving through the ship's corridors with the same disciplined confidence they had shown throughout the engagement, Ilvez's squad regrouped at a central junction point, Kale and Vesa now secured and under guard in a holding compartment near the ship's original crew quarters, Halverson and Castillo watching over the two captured Drell, while the rest of the squad prepared to finish the job. Watchdog, location on the remaining 4 hostiles, Ilvez said, catching her breath after the brief but intense engagement. 4 hostiles have taken refuge in former supply compartment designation Bravo 7, Watchdog reported. They are fortifying the position. Based on movement patterns and the compartment's single access point, I assess they intend to make a defensive stand rather than continue retreating. Smart, Osei said, reloading his weapon with the calm efficiency of long practice. Cornered animals fight hardest when they've got nowhere left to run. Then we don't corner them completely, Ilves said, already turning over the tactical situation in her mind. Watchdog, do we still have control over the ship's internal atmospheric systems in that section? Affirmative, Sergeant. Compartment Bravo 7 and the adjoining corridor remain under full environmental control. A slow, tired smile crossed Ilvez's face, the expression of a soldier who had just found the easiest possible solution to a problem that had, moments before, looked like it might require a costly direct assault. Then let's not waste any more bullets on this. Vent the compartment's atmosphere gradually, slow enough that their suit systems register it as a natural pressure drop rather than an attack. Force them to either come out on our terms, or wait it out until their suit reserves run dry. Either way, we win, without another firefight. Understood, Sergeant. Beginning gradual atmospheric adjustment now. Inside the fortified supply compartment, Tarn was the first to notice the subtle change in the readouts along his suit's internal display, a slow but steady drop in ambient pressure that had not been present moments before. "They're venting the room," he said, alarm creeping into his voice for the first time since the engagement had begun. "Slowly," Merrick confirmed, checking his own readout. "This isn't a rapid decompression attempt. This is patient. They're trying to force us out without another fight, or wait until our suit reserves force the issue for them." Tarn closed his eyes briefly behind his visor, feeling for the first time the full weight of just how completely outmatched his small squad had been, from the very moment they set foot aboard this ship. Every choice the humans had made, from the staged wreckage to the cryogenic ambush, to this quiet, bloodless method of finishing the standoff, had been carefully planned, patiently executed, and utterly effective. "How long can our suits hold against this?" Rhys asked quietly. "Longer than I'd like to test," Tarn admitted, "but not forever." Somewhere above them, unseen and unknown to either the trapped Drell squad or the patient human Marines closing the net around them, the true scale of what the Halcyon had been built to accomplish was only just beginning to reveal itself, as new contacts continued burning steadily toward the wreck from the dark edges of the system, contacts that Vorn's sensors back aboard the Ashen Blade were only now starting to properly understand. Aboard the Ashen Blade, Vorntal stood rigid on his bridge, watching the sensor plot fill with new contacts, one after another, each one confirming his worst fears with cold, mathematical certainty. What had begun as a routine salvage operation on a single drifting wreck was rapidly becoming something far larger and far more dangerous than anything he had anticipated when he first ordered Tarn's squad aboard the Halcyon. "Count," he demanded. 7 confirmed human warships now inbound," Sask reported, his voice tight with barely controlled tension. "Formation matches known human strike group patterns. Lead elements will reach engagement range in approximately 18 minutes at their current burn rate." "Commander, this was never a lone derelict. This was bait for a battle group ambush." Vorn absorbed this with the grim calm of a soldier who had seen too many campaigns go wrong to waste time on panic. "Signal Assembly Command. I want every available warship in this sector redirected to our position immediately, and get me anything you can on why a battle group this size would commit so many resources just to bait a handful of scout ships and salvage crews." Sask worked his console rapidly, cross-referencing data streams from the Ashen Blade. His full sensor suite with whatever fragments of intelligence the Assembly had managed to gather on human fleet movements in recent months. After a tense minute, he looked up, his expression grim. "Commander, I don't think we were the primary target at all. I think we were simply unlucky enough to find this particular piece of bait before anyone else did. Look at this." He pulled up a star chart showing recent patterns of Drell salvage and scouting operations across this entire sector. Dozens of small ships fanning out across the debris fields left behind by months of fighting along the border. Human forces have been seeding this whole region with wrecks like the Halcyon. Ghost ships, rigged the same way, scattered across every major battlefield from the last several months. "They are not hunting for us specifically, Commander. They are hunting for whoever takes the bait first." Vorn felt something cold settle into his chest, an old soldier's dread at realizing the scale of a plan only after it had already begun closing around him. "How many of these ghost ships do you estimate are out there?" "I don't know for certain, sir, but given the resources required, and the pattern of contact reports we've dismissed or filed as unconfirmed over the past 4 months, I would guess dozens. Possibly more. This has been a coordinated operation from the start, and we simply walked into the first trap that happened to be sitting in our path." On the bridge, the weight of that realization settled over the crew like a physical thing. The war with humanity had always been fought on the assumption that humans, for all their stubbornness and unpredictable tactics, were still fundamentally the weaker side, still recovering from a war that had begun with them badly outmatched in ships, in numbers, in nearly every measure the Assembly's analysts used to judge military strength. That assumption had been wrong before, in smaller ways, in individual battles and skirmishes that cost lives but never changed the broader picture. This felt different. This felt like proof that somewhere in human fleet command, strategists had been quietly building an entire layer of hidden traps across contested space, waiting patiently for exactly this kind of overconfident salvage run, and Vorn's own crew had simply been the ones unlucky enough to spring it first. "Options, Commander?" Sask asked quietly. Vorn studied the tactical plot for a long moment, weighing the cold arithmetic of the situation. 18 minutes until the lead human elements reached engagement range. His own squad still trapped somewhere aboard the Halcyon. At least 2 of them confirmed captured based on the last garbled transmission from Tarn. Reinforcements from the nearest assembly fleet elements still hours away at best. "We cannot win a fleet engagement against 7 human warships with a single scout vessel," he said finally. "But I am not leaving my people behind either. Sask, prepare a full data burst to Assembly Command. Everything we've learned about this ghost ship operation, transmitted on maximum priority. If we cannot win this fight, at least the rest of the fleet needs to know what they're facing across this entire sector. And our people aboard the Halcyon." Vorn's jaw tightened. "We hold position at maximum stealth for as long as possible, buying Tarn's squad whatever time we can. If extraction becomes viable, we take it. If it does not, we withdraw before those warships arrive, because a scout ship destroyed here helps no one, least of all the soldiers we came to save." It was not an easy order to give, and Vorn saw the weight of it settle across his bridge crew's faces. The particular grief of soldiers asked to weigh the lives of comrades against the broader needs of an entire war effort. But it was the only order that made sense, and every officer on that bridge had trained long enough to understand the difference between a hard choice and a wrong one. Back aboard the Halcyon. Inside the slowly depressurizing supply compartment, Tarn watched his suit's reserve indicator tick downward with grim inevitability, the atmosphere around his small squad thinning steadily, as the humans' patient siege continued without a single further shot fired. "We have maybe 20 minutes of reserve air left in these suits," Merrick reported, his voice carefully controlled despite the situation. "After that, we either surrender or we suffocate." "There's a third option," Dothan said, though his tone made clear he did not particularly like it. "We could try to force our way out, 4 of us, all armed, against however many guards they've left watching this section. Might catch them off guard if they think we're just going to wait quietly for the air to run out." Tarn considered this briefly, before shaking his head. "They've outplanned us at every turn since we boarded this ship. I am not betting the last 20 minutes of breathable air we have, on the hope that this one time, they haven't already accounted for exactly that option." "Then what?" Riss asked, her young voice carrying an edge of barely restrained fear that she had managed to suppress admirably throughout the engagement, but which was clearly beginning to fray under the mounting pressure of their situation. Tarn was quiet for a long moment, running through every option available to a cornered soldier, facing an enemy that had, by every measure, outthought and outfought his squad, from the very first moment they set foot aboard this ship. Finally, he keyed his suit's external comm, opening a channel not back to the Ashen Blade, but to the general frequency the humans themselves had used earlier to issue their warnings. "This is Squad Leader Tarn Rek, Drell Assembly Forces," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "My squad surrenders. We request that you honor standard treatment protocols for prisoners of war, in accordance with the conventions both our peoples have observed throughout this conflict." There was a brief pause before a response came back. Not the calm, mechanical voice of the ship's AI this time, but a living voice, tired but firm, carrying the particular weight of someone who had fought a long war, and still, somehow, retained a measure of professional respect for an enemy who knew when a fight was truly over. "This is Sergeant Ilves, United Nations Space Fleet. Your surrender is accepted, Squad Leader." Have your people lay down weapons and exit the compartment with hands visible. You will be treated according to the conventions, same as your 2 comrades already secured. Nobody else needs to get hurt today." Tarn allowed himself a brief, bitter moment of relief, tempered heavily by the knowledge of just how badly this entire operation had gone, and how much worse it might yet get once Assembly Command fully understood the scale of what they were now facing across this sector. "Understood, Sergeant." Standing down now. One by one, Tarn's remaining squad members set down their weapons and stepped out of the fortified supply compartment, hands raised, meeting the same disciplined, professional treatment that Kale and Vesa had already received, restrained but not mistreated, their suits' life support left functional, their basic dignity as prisoners of war respected in accordance with conventions that, despite everything else that had changed about this brutal, grinding conflict, both sides had somehow managed to keep observing. "Get them settled with the others," Ilves ordered, watching as Osei and Reyes secured the last of the captured Drell soldiers. "And somebody get Doc Whitfield down here to check on that stunned pair. Make sure the charge didn't do any lasting damage. Command's going to want these 4 in good enough shape to actually talk once we get them back to a proper facility." "Copy that, Sarge," Osei replied, already moving to comply. Ilves allowed herself a brief moment to lean against the corridor wall, feeling the accumulated exhaustion of 4 months in stasis, followed immediately by a tense firefight, finally beginning to catch up with her. But there was no real time to rest. The tactical situation aboard the Halcyon might have resolved itself favorably, but the larger picture, the reason this ship had been positioned here in the first place, was only just beginning to unfold. "Watchdog. Status on the incoming fleet elements," she said, straightening up and forcing her focus back to the mission at hand. "Lead elements of Strike Group Meridian will achieve engagement range with the Drell scout vessel. Ashen Blade. In approximately 11 minutes, Sergeant," the ship's AI reported. "The Ashen Blade has begun transmitting what I assess to be a high-priority intelligence burst toward Drell assembly space, likely containing detailed information regarding this operation and similar decoy vessels deployed throughout the sector. Figured they'd try that once they realized what was happening," Ilves said. "Can we stop the transmission?" "Negative, Sergeant. The Ashen Blade is transmitting on multiple redundant frequencies specifically designed to resist jamming. Any attempt to block the signal entirely would require resources beyond the Halcyon. Its current capabilities, particularly given her limited remaining power reserves following the Crimson Wake activation sequence." Ilves considered this for a moment before shrugging slightly, a soldier's practical acceptance of a fact she could not change. "Then let them send their warning. Command always knew this operation had a limited shelf life once word got out. Every ghost ship we've seeded across this sector was always going to get discovered eventually, and honestly, the fear this creates once the Drell realize just how many of their own wrecks might secretly be armed traps is probably worth more than the tactical surprise of any single engagement." "An astute observation, Sergeant," Watchdog replied. "Shall I prepare the Halcyon its remaining weapon systems for the approaching engagement? Strike Group Meridian will likely appreciate additional support once they arrive, and this vessel retains several capabilities the Drell scans were never designed to detect." Ilves's tired face cracked into a small, grim smile at that, the particular satisfaction of a soldier learning that the ship she had spent 4 months sleeping inside still had a few surprises left in reserve, even after everything it had already accomplished today. "Do it," she said. "Let's show Strike Group Meridian that the old girl's still got some fight left in her." Far above the ship, in the dark reaches of the system, the human warships of Strike Group Meridian continued their steady burn toward the Halcyon. The burrito was cold. Ashen Blade. Vorntal watched his own sensor plot with the grim understanding that whatever came next, the war he thought he understood, had just changed in ways his entire fleet would need months, if not years, to fully account for. "Commander," Sask said quietly, "human warships will reach effective weapons range in approximately 6 minutes." "Orders?" Vorn stared at the tactical display for a long moment, thinking of Tarn, of Riss and Dothan, and Merrick, and the twins, all of them now presumably captured somewhere aboard that deceptively deadly wreck, and weighed that loss against the 6 minutes of warning his crew had already managed to buy for the rest of the assembly fleet. "Withdraw," he said finally, the word heavy, with everything it cost him to say it. "Full burn, best possible speed, away from this system. We've done what we came to do, Sask. Now we make sure the rest of the fleet survives long enough to use what we've learned." The burn. Ashen Blade broke away from the debris field at maximum burn, her engines straining well past their normal safety margins, as Vorn pushed the small scout ship harder than he had ever pushed a vessel under his command. Behind them, the sensor plot showed the 7 human warships of Strike Group Meridian, continuing their steady approach toward the Halcyon. His position, apparently content to let the fleeing scout ship go, rather than divert resources to chase down a single vessel that no longer posed any real threat. "They're not pursuing," Sask reported, a note of surprise in his voice as he watched the tactical plot update. "Strike Group Meridian is holding formation around the Halcyon. Commander, it looks like their entire purpose here was recovery and consolidation, not chasing down witnesses." "They don't need to chase us," Vorn said grimly, watching the same plot with a soldier's understanding of when a battle had truly been decided. "We already saw everything they wanted us to see. A functioning ghost ship, a captured squad, proof that this operation works exactly as intended. Whether we escape to report it or not barely matters to them at this point. If anything, our escape helps them. Fear spreads faster through a fleet that knows the danger and survived it, than through one that simply vanishes without explanation." The Ashen Blade continued her burn for several more tense minutes, before finally reaching the edge of the debris field and beginning the long transit back toward the nearest assembly outpost, carrying with her the data burst that would soon reshape how the entire Drell fleet approached every drifting wreck, every apparent piece of easy salvage, across the length of the human border. Aboard the Halcyon, Sergeant Ilves watched the same tactical situation unfold from a very different perspective, standing on the ship's makeshift command deck alongside the arriving officers of Strike Group Meridian, who had shuttled aboard within minutes of achieving orbit around the drifting wreck. "Good work, Sergeant," said Captain Reyes Delgado, commanding officer of the lead cruiser. UNS Vigilant. Studying the tactical readouts with evident satisfaction, 6 hostiles neutralized, 4 captured alive, minimal damage to the vessel itself. This is exactly the outcome Fleet Command was hoping for when they greenlit the Ghost Ship program. 4 months in a cryopod for a fight that lasted maybe 20 minutes, Ilvis said, allowing herself a tired but genuine smile. "I'll take it, Captain. Beats the alternative. How are your people holding up?" "Tired, but intact. Nobody hurt beyond what a few days' rest will fix. The Drell prisoners are secure, and, from what Doc Whitfield tells me, in good enough condition to answer questions once intelligence gets a look at them." Ilves glanced toward the section of the ship where the 4 captured Drell soldiers sat under guard, their earlier defiance largely replaced by the particular exhaustion of soldiers who understood, perhaps for the first time in this long war, just how thoroughly their entire strategic assumptions about human weakness had been turned against them. Captain Delgado nodded, satisfaction evident on his weathered features. "This is the 3rd confirmed ghost ship activation in the past 6 weeks, Sergeant. Command's projections suggest we've got at least a dozen more still seated across contested space, waiting for the right unlucky salvage crew to stumble across them. Every one of these operations chips away a little more at the Assembly's confidence, forces them to second-guess every wreck they encounter, every derelict that looks like easy pickings. And once word spreads that half their salvage runs might secretly be armed traps," Ilves said, following the logic through to its natural conclusion, "they stop taking the easy salvage at all, slows their whole recovery operation to a crawl." "That's the idea," Delgado confirmed. "Humanity might not have the numbers the Assembly does, Sergeant, or the centuries of established fleet doctrine most of the galaxy's older powers can draw on, but we've got something else. We adapt fast. We plan patient, and we're not above making an enemy afraid of things that used to look completely harmless to them. A drifting wreck, an empty corridor, a door that opens just a little too easily." He allowed himself a small, tired smile of his own. "Fear is cheap to manufacture, Sergeant. once you understand what your enemy actually believes about you, and you use that belief against them. Ylvis considered this for a long moment, thinking back over the past several hours, the staged wreckage, the patient wait in cryo, the deliberately non-lethal countermeasures designed to capture rather than simply kill, the careful, methodical dismantling of a Drell boarding squad that had walked in expecting an easy salvage run and instead found 6 of the galaxy's most stubborn soldiers waiting exactly where the enemy least expected them. They really believed this ship was empty, she said quietly, right up until the moment the lights turned red. That's rather the point, Delgado said. Let them keep believing every wreck they find is exactly what it looks like. Let them keep sending salvage crews into debris fields across this entire sector, wondering every single time whether they've just found genuine easy pickings, or whether they've just signed their own crew's death warrant by walking aboard the wrong ghost. He turned to survey the darkened, frost-covered command deck around them, the same deck that Tarn's squad had once confidently declared secure, mere hours before everything had changed. Humanity spent the first years of this war being underestimated, Sergeant. I intend to make sure the Assembly spends the rest of it wondering what else we've got waiting for them in the dark. Several hours later, once Strike Group Meridian had secured the Halcyon properly and begun the process of towing her back toward friendly territory for repairs and eventual redeployment on some future ghost ship operation, Ylvis found a quiet moment to sit alone in what had briefly served as her squad's makeshift command post, running back through the events of the day in her mind. 4 months of frozen sleep, followed by 20 minutes of tense, careful combat, followed by hours of debriefing and paperwork that felt like it might stretch on well past her patience for sitting still after so long lying motionless in a cryopod. It had not been the kind of glorious, decisive battle that made headlines back on Earth. No massive fleet engagement, no desperate last stand against overwhelming odds. Just a small, quiet trap, executed patiently, that had cost the enemy 4 captured soldiers, and, more importantly, a piece of their confidence that would prove far more valuable in the long run than any single tactical victory. She thought about Tarn, the Drell squad leader who had shown, even in defeat, a measure of professional caution and respect that had made this whole engagement feel less like a slaughter and more like an honest contest between 2 capable forces, one of which had simply prepared better than the other. She wondered, briefly, what would happen to him now, whether fleet intelligence would treat him as just another source of information to extract, or whether there was room, somewhere in this brutal, grinding war, for something like mutual respect between enemies who had both simply been doing their jobs as best they could. Penny for your thoughts, Sergeant, Osei said, dropping into a seat across from her, looking equally exhausted after the long day's events. Just thinking about how strange this whole war has gotten, Ylvis said. We spend years getting written off as the weak, disorganized new kids on the galactic block, and now, we're the ones setting traps clever enough to make an entire enemy fleet afraid of empty wrecks. Guess that's what happens when everybody underestimates you long enough, Osei said with a shrug. Eventually you get real good at making that underestimation cost them something. Ylvis allowed herself a final, tired smile at that, thinking of the countless other ghost ships still drifting silently across the contested border between human and Drell space, each one waiting patiently, indefinitely, for the next overconfident salvage crew to stumble across what looked like easy pickings, never suspecting until the very last moment that the lights were about to turn red. Word of the Halcyon incident spread through assembly space within days, carried by Vorn's data burst and confirmed independently by at least 2 other Drell vessels that reported near-identical encounters with apparently derelict human wrecks in separate sectors along the border. The Assembly's salvage operations, once a reliable source of valuable technology and battlefield intelligence, slowed dramatically as commanders across the fleet began ordering extensive, time-consuming verification scans before authorizing any boarding action on so much as a single drifting hull. Some officers dismissed the reports as isolated incidents, unfortunate but unlikely to repeat given the resources required to maintain such an elaborate deception across multiple sectors. Others, more cautious, began treating every human wreck as a potential threat regardless of how convincing the surface evidence of genuine destruction appeared, a shift in doctrine that cost the assembly countless hours and resources previously spent on efficient, confident salvage operations. Vorntal, for his part, submitted a full report to Assembly Command, detailing everything his squad had witnessed and endured aboard the Halcyon, including a personal recommendation that any future encounter with an apparently abandoned human vessel be treated with the same caution and respect one might extend to a live enemy warship, regardless of how convincing the wreckage appeared from a distance. His report ended with a single observation that would eventually be quoted, in modified form, across dozens of subsequent Assembly intelligence briefings concerning human military doctrine. They do not simply fight the war they are given, Vorn had written. They quietly build the war they intend to fight, patient and thorough, and they are content to wait months, even years, for the moment their enemy walks confidently into a trap built long in advance. We called them weak, because they lost early battles cheaply. We should have asked why they were willing to lose those battles so cheaply in the first place. Somewhere in the vast dark between the stars, dozens more ghost ships continued their silent drift across contested space, each one a patient, quiet promise that the next wreck any Drell salvage crew encountered might be exactly what it appeared to be. Or it might not be. And nobody, on either side of that long and stubborn war, would ever again be quite so certain of the difference, until the moment the lights turned red.